That's a background, right? Because I'm pretty sure it's like nighttime for you guys.
Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, wow, it is very sunny for 9 p.m. in
Yes,
Israel.
yes. It's an optimistic background.
That's
Yeah,
a
very optimistic.
Yes. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Welcome to another meeting of the Middle East Center. My name is Tom Webner. I'm the founder of the Middle East Center in Israel, and I'm thrilled to invite you to host you this evening in a fascinating and groundbreaking live YouTube meeting with a truly unique personality, Michael Gamal, aka the Coptic Kaparah, an interesting nickname, a Coptic Zionist influencer of Egyptian descent residing in the USA. Michael Gamal, from Egypt's Coptic Christian minority, described himself as having once been a great hater of Israel due to social indoctrination. However, today, since the October 7th, he has undergone a profound process of in-depth learning. Today, he proudly defines himself as a Coptic Zionist. Michael, thank you very much for joining us this evening. We would love to hear about your journey. Where would you like to start your story?
With pleasure. Well, let me first start off by saying hello, marhaba, vashalom. אני מייקל, אני בן 38 שנה, אמא שלי ואבא שלי ממצרים, אבל אני גר בקליפורניה. אני ללמוד עברית, ואני מאוד שמח להיות פה.
ברוך
אני
הבא.
ציוני.
ברוך
So
הבא.
that was the extent of my conversational Hebrew. I am taking Hebrew lessons, so I needed to get that out there.
That was very great. You didn't have any mistakes.
I had a lot of friends helping me practice, so I can't remember what the question was because I was so focused on getting that.
It was just an invitation to decide where would you like to begin your story and to start share us your story the way that you see fit. And don't worry, whenever you will arrive a natural stop, I will ask you a question.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I will start off by saying if we go back a year and a half, this was unthinkable for me. I was as vile as you could find them to be. And what had happened was it was a culmination of little moments here and there that brought me to a point where I felt that I had to choose between being an advocate for the Palestinians and my humanity. See, I subscribed to something Dr. Inat Wilf coins as Palestinianism. I didn't think of it in those terms back then, but that's how I think of it right now. And I used to wake up with the one consistent feeling that I hated Israel. And it sounds crazy to somebody who might be uninvolved with Middle Eastern politics. But if you are in this advocacy cause, you will find yourself losing your humanity almost on a daily basis because you constantly have to suspend your humanity, your intellect, your integrity to really keep pushing this narrative that is a subscription to Palestinianism. So one of the moments that I had, like one of the first moments that I remember it was during the month of October 7th, after October 7th. And I was in San Diego with a couple of my friends. And I remember we were walking from bar to bar and we reached a red light. And I can't remember what I was looking at, but I remember I was looking at a poster of the hostages. It was somewhere and I was just looking at it. And this might have lasted 10 seconds, but as I was looking at that poster, the only thing I could think about was the videos that I saw of, I think, people in New York, and they were defacing the posters of the hostages. I can't remember which hostages I was looking at, but I remember having this feeling in me that said, you might be a horrible person, but you're not so horrible that you're going to deface the posters of the hostages. That's the first time where I really had this attack of conscience about what I was supporting. And it continued to escalate from there. I just found myself so uncomfortable and really disgusted with what I was. I don't want to use the word force because everything I did was a choice. I'm not a victim or anything like that. I was disgusted by what I was doing to support the Palestinians. I had this realization where, I can say I hate extremism and all this stuff as much as I can, but back then, when, when it came time to really stand for, who you are as a person, I was doing more to defend the Palestinian narrative than I was doing to show sympathy towards the Israeli victims of Palestinian terrorism. And that was sort of like that realization, I think, set the wheels in motion for where I am today. And, I say this quite often, that to really fully immerse yourself in the Palestinian cause, you have to disconnect yourself from a lot. I had all but sacrificed my Coptic identity. I considered myself an Arab nationalist. I had to ignore the facts that were very, very inconvenient for the Palestinian narrative. There is that belief, and you'll see it in every comment section that involves Israel-Palestine, that, well, one day the Jews just showed up and decided to kick the Arabs off their land, right? And of course, they'll show you the map that has, pre-Israel in the borders that were, created by the British, not the Ottoman Empire, but it'll show you, the map from the early 1900s to the 1920s to 1948 to 67 to today. And this is propaganda that we would push quite heavily. And it requires a lot of omission. It requires a lot of dishonesty. And I'm not going to say it's completely bankrupt of any factual information, but it's so sparing. It is just overwhelmingly dishonest. And sacrificing who I was as a Coptic person, sacrificing that indigenous claim, I look back at it now and I couldn't believe that I did that. But I also see other people doing this, not necessarily with their indigeneity, but when I see Gays for Gaza, I am looking at a people who are willing to sacrifice their better interests for a cause that is inherently bloodthirsty and morally bankrupt. Today, if we look at the conflict, it is not drastically different from the early 1930s, when I think the foreign secretary of the British Empire said, "This is the problem. The Jews want a state, and the Arabs will resist to the last a Jewish state." They just did not want a Jewish state, and that is precisely the same problem that we find ourselves today. Now, things are a little bit differently today because we do see Israel being better integrated into the Middle East. There is a lot more potential for the Abraham Accords. I do think eventually you will see a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel as long as the conditions are okay for Israel. But in many ways, the conflict today perfectly mirrors what the conflict was in the 1920s and the 1930s. If you look at what happened in the 1929 Hebron massacre, where Jewish men, women, and children were massacred, butchered, raped. And it's not just those violent acts that are perfectly parallel to what we see today. It's also the denial. It is the denial of the brutality. It's the denial of the rapes. We see this exact same thing play out with October 7th. They will deny the sexual assault and rape that Israeli women and men had experienced during October 7th. Even if I give you an exact name, Raz Cohen, and I tell you exactly what he saw, this is directly quoted from him, they will still deny it. And it's no different than what happened back then. And similar to back then, if you remember correctly, the Haganah went to Hebron and told the Jewish community there, we have a feeling that there is going to be an attack. Please allow us to provide you with a couple dozen men so we can defend you. And the people then said, no, these are our friends. We've known them for so long, they wouldn't do anything like that. And to be fair to the Arabs of Hebron at the time, many did risk their lives to save the Jewish people. So I don't want to gloss over that fact because I do think it's important. I think it's important that we humanize those people that took the risks to save Jewish people. But I do see a parallel between now and then. The parallel that I see in that context is that you still have a segment of the Jewish population today in the diaspora, mostly within Canada and the United States, who unfortunately do not understand the necessity of a Jewish state. And similar to the, well, not completely similar, but the people who were living in the kibbutzim along the Gaza envelope, these were people who, they were literally the most idyllic Israelis. They were far left-leaning, they wanted peace, they would bring, Gazans into Israel for work and medical attention. I think even one of the kibbutz had set up a fund to cover the costs of Gazan medical expenses. And so it was the same people whom they trusted and they considered their friends that turned around and slaughtered them. And I think that without this sort of grasp of history, people really don't understand the conflict. Because what people will say is, well, the conflict is about the settlements. The conflict is about East Jerusalem. The conflict is about the occupation. These three issues were on the table many times throughout history. In 2000, in 2008, even Netanyahu, when, maybe the Likud might not want to admit this, but even Netanyahu had agreed in principle to the 1967 borders in 2009 or 2010, I believe. And so then people ask, well, what does the conflict boil down to? The conflict boils down to this. The Palestinians would rather create hell for Israelis than create a paradise for themselves.
Michael?
Yeah, I'm here. I felt like maybe you would ask a question after that.
Yeah, okay. Before we will continue, since not all Israelis or not even many Israelis are familiar or aware of the situation, the mentality, the uniqueness of the Coptic community, maybe you can elaborate a bit more about who are the Copts, and let's call it the Coptic community for beginners. Can you give us a tour guide explanation about the Copts?
Yes, of course. So the word Copt itself simply means Egyptian. It is derived from the Greek word Agyptos. And so the word Coptic literally means Egyptian, which can be confusing sometimes because in today's modern vocabulary, whenever you refer to somebody as Coptic, generally it's assumed that they belong to the Coptic Orthodox Church, which that was the church that I was born into. So Coptic is sort of a fancy word for Egyptian, as far as it relates to the church. It's basically Egyptian Orthodox, no different than Russian Orthodox or Greek Orthodox or any of those sects within Orthodox Christianity. Now, I myself am agnostic, but that doesn't take anything away from me being Coptic, because Coptic is an ethnicity. Egyptians, by and large, are not ethnically Arab. We have less than 20% admixture. But for those born into the Coptic Orthodox Church, they maintain a much more direct bloodline to the ancient Egyptians. And so the Coptic language in and of itself was the final stage of the ancient Egyptian language before the Arab Muslim armies came and conquered Egypt. And so the worldwide Coptic population is around 30 million, with around 15 million in Egypt and then 2 million between the United States and Canada. And 30 million is a huge number. 30 million is twice as many Jewish people worldwide. You could, the Coptic population exceeds the populations of Lebanon, Jordan, and Israel combined. That's how many Coptic Orthodox people there are in the world. And we are the largest Christian minority in the Middle East. And this is something that I have to get to, so I'm going to jump into it directly. We are among the most persecuted minorities in the Middle East. And unlike what you see in other countries where persecution is top down, meaning from the government down, the persecution in Egypt is largely from the bottom up. It starts with society and their attitudes towards us. There was I believe, a Pew Research poll done in 2013 where it revealed that 49% of Egyptian Muslims hated Coptic people. That is a staggering number when you consider Egypt's population. And I think back at that time, Egypt's population was around 105 million. So, you know, roughly slice that in half, and half the country hates us. And then also other alarming trends, other alarming answers in those polls was that 80% of Egyptian Muslims agreed with the death penalty for apostasy. Now, there are rules that directly affect Coptic Orthodox people for no other reason than they are Coptic Orthodox people. For instance, a Muslim can marry a Christian or a Jewish person, and that's completely legal. But a Coptic man like myself, I could not marry a Muslim woman in Egypt. It would just be illegal. A Muslim cannot convert to Christianity and have his religion recognized. I think there was maybe one case where they were actually successful, but it was absolutely hell for them, and they had to flee the country. But an Egyptian Christian can enter Islam at any point and face zero obstacles to doing that. My dad's friend was a former Muslim. He converted to Christianity, and he did it in Egypt. And they cannot arrest you for that reason. They cannot legally arrest you for that reason. But what they do is they create fake charges against you to hold you in prison. And the fake charge that was leveled against my dad's friend was that he was a homosexual. And they put him in jail for that. And he lost access to his kids. His wife, of course, was able to divorce him very easily. He lives here in America now, but he has not seen his children in over 8 years. This is just one of the many ways in which we are persecuted. And I think the most painful thing about this is the level of denial that exists within Egyptian Muslims. I am not saying that every Egyptian Muslim is horrible. In fact, some of the better advocates for us have been either Egyptian Muslims or Egyptian ex-Muslims. Somebody like Samad Abdelhamid, he can perfectly explain to you what goes on. Somebody like Yasmin Muhammad, she can tell you firsthand the horrors that we experience, whether it's lynch mob attacks on our villages, whether it is Coptic women being kidnapped and raped, or whether it's just our churches being attacked. It is a daily struggle to be Coptic Orthodox in Egypt. And the Coptic immigrants that come here will tell you that firsthand. One of my parents' friends, Hani, he moved here 10 years ago. And Hani, relatively accomplished person for somebody who's Coptic in Egypt. He had finished his tenure at the Air Force Academy. And what was unique about that is, you know, I asked him, how was that for you to be in the Air Force Academy? Because every Egyptian has to do military service. The discrimination even exists within the military because Coptic Orthodox people will not be admitted into intelligence services. Coptic Orthodox people will generally be held back from anything beyond their mandatory military service. And our friend Hani was told to his face, normally we would not allow you into the Air Force Academy because you're a Christian. And this transfers to every sort of professional setting that you can think of in Egypt, which is why Coptic people tend to own their own businesses as well. which is another reason why a lot of the population hates us, because then they just think, oh, we are successful without merit. They think that the country just gives us things, which is couldn't be any further from the truth. And so, like, I mean, every profession in Egypt sort of has like its own union / syndicate, and this is heavily controlled by Muslims. I mean, it is like you need connections to get into these places. Even the Egyptian soccer team, the national Egyptian soccer team, in its entire existence has had only 5 Coptic players. Only 5. So, and I will say all this, and the Muslim response to this is, I am lying, I am exaggerating, I am making things up. There was a Coptic woman whose story that I shared on Instagram, and she is detailing how she was pressured and sexually assaulted by her Muslim coach. And if you look at the comments from the Muslims, it's, we are lying about this so we can, you know, to make it easier for us to claim asylum and refugeehood and all those things. And it actually got taken down because enough Muslims complained about it. Like, I actually got a violation on my account for sharing this woman's story. And it's too bad. It is really horrible what we go through in Egypt. And it's, I mean, you know, prior to Bashar al-Assad fleeing Syria, I would look at Syria and I said, despite the civil war, Syrian Christians still have it better than Coptic Orthodox people. I don't say that now because literally Al-Qaeda is running Syria. But back then, I really believed it. I think we are barely better than Sudanese Christians and Iraqi Christians, which is not a high bar to hold ourselves to.
Apparently not. And is the hatred between the Egyptian majority, the Muslim majority in Egypt and the Coptic community is only based on religion, or is there more to it?
I would say that it is partial. It has to do with religion. There's absolutely a religious component, and I would say it's not. You can compare it very easily to what the Druze are currently going through, the Druzim right now in Syria. You could easily compare it to what the Yazidis go through. It's a bit better because unlike those two groups, the Copts, because they're Christian, are recognized as Ahl al-Kitab, meaning people of the book in Arabic. Whereas the Druze, they're considered heretics.
Yes.
And there are edicts from people like Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Kathir, where it says, kill them where you find them. Do not even accept their repentance. And this goes, especially for the Yazidis, because to them they're pagans in the eyes of Muslims. But so there's absolutely a religious component, and the fact that any religious minority in the Arab and Muslim world is automatically seen as a fifth column. We are told that we are agents for the West, whether it's the United States, the UK. I've even heard that we are agents for Israel. Maybe I'm not doing a whole lot right now to improve on that rumor. I've heard things that we hold Israeli weapons in our churches, which is crazy because you would imagine out of all the times that we've been attacked by Egyptian Muslims, we might have used those weapons once if that were actually true. And the problem with Egypt is that Egypt, for a lot of people don't know this, but Egypt is essentially the birthplace of modern Islamic fundamentalism. A lot of people would say that it is actually Saudi Arabia because of Wahhabism, but it's actually Egypt, because you have figures like Hassan al-Banna, who was the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood when it first started. And then you have figures like Sayyid Qutb, who is sort of the godfather of militant Islamic belief. And so Egypt, and then you have Gamal Islamiyya. I mean, Egypt is a hotbed of Islamist terrorism, and has been like that for a long time. So there has to be a religious component to it.
But I'm asking, is there another components other than the religion? Is there more than on the surface? Are there any claims, or is it also a national issue and rather than just being a religious issue?
I'd say it's largely a religious issue. I'm sure you could find, sort of secondary components to that, but it is almost entirely religious because if you boil it down, we are ethnically the same as them.
Yes.
It's not like we speak a different dialect of Arabic. It's not like we're ethnically different from them. It's not like we're purple and they're brown. It is religious.
Yes.
And Egypt has not taken until recently the problem of extremism seriously. It is woefully behind in its approach to tackling extremism.
You think that it changed recently?
Somewhat, yeah. I have to be honest about the situation and say that President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has probably been the best president towards Christians out of any president that Egypt has had. Definitely probably the best one. He's actually the first one that would visit Coptic Orthodox people on Christmas and Easter. First one ever. So, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, I think he did what he could politically for us without risking the ire of the greater Muslim majority. But that's why I do go back to saying that this discrimination, this persecution, it's not from the top down. Some elements may be from the government. That's indisputable, but it is largely from the bottom up. It's that there is a huge segment of the Egyptian Muslim population that hates us for no other reason than we are Christian.
So actually, before we started this recording, we spoke about your tattoo on your right hand. Yes, maybe you will show it again because it was before we recorded it.
Sure.
Yes.
Shiri,
Here,
Ariel.
the name of the Bibas family abductees that were murdered by Hamas. And you choose to start your story in a point where you are standing in front of a poster of the abductees and you're saying to yourself, no, I want to remove it. And you're making a moral choice. But today you carry them with you. That's a long way.
Yes. I compare it to this. Let's say I live in Southern California, and so Las Vegas is about 4 hours away from me. Let's say I'm driving from Southern California and I'm going on a short vacation to Las Vegas. Now, let's say that I accidentally get on the wrong entrance ramp from the freeway and I drive 400 miles in the wrong direction. Now I have two options. I can cover that distance and just go back home, and I guess I don't have a vacation anymore. Or I can cover that distance plus make it to my destination. And that's what I compare what I'm doing to, is that I could have just, once I sort of quietly walked out of the pro-Palestine advocacy movement, I could have just kept my mouth shut. I could have just, and that was sort of I assumed that's what I would do, was that I would just exit this realm of politics completely. I would be one of those people that was uninvolved, didn't care. And to this day, I actually envy those people because I can't not care. It's as simple as that. And I can't explain why to you. I can't not care. It's just something in me that has to care about this. But if I just stopped and became uninvolved, what does that say, and how does that mitigate the damage that I had already done by being a part of this movement, spreading the venomous lies and hatred that I did against Israelis and Jewish people? It didn't occur to me right then and there that I had this obligation to the Jewish and Israeli community. But that slowly but surely became apparent to me. I did feel this obligation, and I do feel this obligation to the Jewish and the Israeli community, because I'm not a stupid person. People who hear me speak can tell that I'm quite articulate, I'm quite well read, and that is precisely what made me one of the most dangerous voices for the Palestinian cause, because I had this influence on people who probably didn't want to think for themselves. They wanted to hear what I had to say because I made it palatable for them. I made it digestible for them. I could rationalize it in ways that they weren't able to. And so I do have a duty to do this. And it's something that I wake up every day excited to do. I genuinely love what I do. And the reason why it took me so long to sort of come forward is because I was just ashamed of who I was. I would project sort of the experiences that I had with my own community onto Israelis and Jewish people. You know, in the early days, I wouldn't tell people that I used to be an advocate for the Palestinian cause because I was just so like, you know, it felt so dirty after I'd left, and I just sort of felt like this monster. And I was so shocked and surprised by just the embrace and graciousness and forgiveness of the Jewish community. I can tell you with 100% certainty that I've never had an embrace like that before. The grace that the Jewish community has showed me, it's humbling, because everything that I thought about them was wrong, literally everything. And it's hard to put into words, honestly. This is like one of the moments where I'm not so articulate. It's because I struggle to find the words of just how happy I am today to be doing this.
So let's speak about the other side of the mirror and the reactions that you received from the Egyptian community or the Arab community in general, or the Coptic community specifically.
So the Arab and Muslim reaction tends to be one of two. Either I'm a traitor, a coward, a sellout, all this, or I'm not actually Egyptian. I'm a Mossad agent. I get that all the time. I am a Mossad agent. I am being paid by AIPAC. I am being paid by Israel. I wish it were true, but I'm doing this out of the goodness of my heart. I wish it were true. But yeah, you have this denial. You know, you either get the denial or you get you're a coward, you're a traitor, all this. That's stuff I expect. But from the Coptic community, I've only had one Coptic person actually get mad at me, you know? And it's to be expected. You're never going to have 100% of everybody either against you or for you. But I would tell you that at least for people who are in my age bracket and those who are older, especially those in the diaspora, they're largely pro-Israel. My parents were pro-Israel far before I was. My parents never indulged me in Palestinianism. They were actively against it. And most older Cops and Cops my age that I have interacted with throughout my life have been Zionists. They might not say that they themselves are Zionists, because considering their upbringing, that is a loaded term. It comes with a lot of baggage for them. But in practice, they are Zionists. And I think it's because Coptic people see a lot of themselves in Israelis. And Coptic people tend to be quite religious. They're more conservative than, let's say your average American Christian. And so my mom, who is relatively religious, she's not super religious, but she's relatively religious, she says that land is Jewish land. That is her religious conviction, that land is Jewish land. Now, I don't subscribe to that. I don't subscribe to that reason. I don't believe that God gave land to anybody. But history and archaeology proves that the Jewish people are the only people to have maintained a consistent presence in that land and a consistent culture for 3,700 years. And so Coptic people see a lot of Israel in themselves. We are a community that is dying for self-determination, literally dying too, because we are being killed and raped, and our villages are getting burned down, and then they deny it. But so they might not admit it, but we desperately need our own version of Zionism in order to really live prosperous lives in our own land.
Is it something that's happening? Do you have a form of a national movement or a movement for independence or autonomy? Is it something that is in the public discourse of the Coptic community at all?
you will hear people, you know, I don't want to say the word behind the scenes, but amongst Coptic Orthodox people, they will say between themselves, we wish that we had a, you know, a situation like Israel where they have, you know, an army and their own state and they have self-determination. They say amongst themselves that we wish that. But the risk of saying that out loud, the risk that presents to the Coptic Orthodox people is so great that people will never say that out loud. Least of all from official spokespeople from the Coptic Orthodox Church, because at the end of the day, their responsibility is the well-being of the Coptic people in Egypt, which can change like that. So you're not going to hear it say it from them. And that's the sort of the disappointing thing about the Coptic Orthodox Church is that they've really restrained themselves from speaking to the issues that we face. You know, they say that there isn't persecution. Well, I guess technically that's true because there's no state-sponsored persecution, but it is a lie to say that we aren't persecuted by the rest of the population.
So, you know, things change very rapidly in the Middle East, and as part of the changes that we see in the next in those weeks, actually, we see another population which is a minority that is being harassed or butchered by political Islam, the Druze in Syria, that in a first of its kind move have received an Israeli air support that basically made them win on at least on this battle or in this round. And maintain their, I would call it partial independence of autonomy. I know that other minorities in Syria are looking on this occasion and start recalculate their way in the new reality and starting to think loudly about an alliance with Israel. Do you think that this new situation, when Israel is actively protecting a minority in Syria, which is basically another border country, the same that Egypt is a bordering country, do you think it might change the opinions and the discourse of the Coptic community regarding alliances with Israel?
I think it absolutely has an effect. I think if you're a Coptic Orthodox person or any religious and ethnic minority in the Middle East for that matter, if you're looking at what's going on in Syria to the Druze and the Alawites and the Christians, I don't see how you can be left with any other feeling other than they're our only true ally in the Middle East. There are only natural ally in the Middle East, given the context. And so I think with Egypt, it's a little bit different, just for some of the reality on the ground. So unlike Syria, which is a multi-ethnic and multi-religious country, you know, it's similar to Lebanon in the sense that they have Druze, they have Alawites, they have Christians, Sunnis, Shia, Turkmen, Kurds, and Armenians. It is quite a diverse country when compared to Egypt, where really, you know, the fault lines in Egypt falls along, are you Christian or are you Muslim? And Egypt hasn't gone through what Syria or Lebanon or Iraq have gone through. So we are not quite there yet to where we can really start talking about what changes can we make. But I do believe that that is where we are heading towards with Syria. Syria it's going to have to be broken up. There is just no way that Syria can stay a unified state. And listen, I don't know exactly what is going on in Syria. I can't tell you exactly what is going on, but it boils down to two things. Either the government knew about what the Bedouin and their security forces were going to do to the Druze and the Alawites, and it was an unofficial, you know, government-endorsed massacre, or the government really can't control these groups, and neither of those things are good. So, you know, we are in a situation right now where they had one dictator in Bashar al-Assad who was brutal beyond belief, but now in a decentralized country where the head of the country cannot control his militias, now you have 1,000 Bashar al-Assads running around slaughtering Syrians. And I think that we are headed towards Balkanization for Syria. And I think that this will have an effect perhaps in Lebanon as well, because whatever affects Syria affects Lebanon. But Egypt is a bit of a different case.
Definitely. Fascinating. Okay, I would like to take a few questions from my friend Gedalia, who is with us on the chat. And
Sure, I'm going to drink water really quick.
Sure. Why not? So I'm going to read one of Gedalia's questions, quoting Gedalia. I always say that the obsession with Israel is not so bad for Israel. Instead, it's terrible for ethnic non-Muslim minorities in the Middle East. Do you agree?
I agree, because one of the first things that happened after the establishment of Israel was that Arab leaders started to look at their ethnic and religious minorities as this is a potential Israel. This, what if this encourages them to seek self-determination? And so, yeah, it had an adverse effect, but I don't want that to be misconstrued as in me saying or blaming Israel, the establishment of Israel, for the suffering that we had, because we suffered before the establishment of Israel as well. It just picked up intensity because now the Arab and Muslim leaders became paranoid about their own ethnic and religious minorities, which it was always an existing sentiment. It just was brought to the surface once Israel became a reality. And yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. And now we would like to give the opportunity to our friend Koren Eisner to say a few words. Koren, first of all, thank you for introducing me and Jamal and Michael. It was an introduction that led to this evening, and it's much appreciated.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. And Michael, it's a pleasure to see you in person.
Yeah, great.
Man, I feel honored. What can I say? I just want to say I've been following you for a while, and I'm in total awe. I feel what I think you feel, many Israelis and Jews feel when they see you. It's a deep sense of respect, so I'm very happy we managed to have this conversation. A lot has happened since we first touched base in the Middle East. And I just want to say there are a few things that kind of struck me that really struck me when watching you and your messages. Is first of all, you're what we call a mensch. You're familiar with this Yiddish word, a person with a big soul. I mean, I'm going to start with some compliments and prepare yourself. Okay, I hope you'll find with that. You have a big soul. You really feel for things, and when tragedies happen, you're very emotional, and it really gets to you, and that's a beautiful quality. Secondly, you're a warrior. I mean, you're a tough man. You're taking a lot of heat out there, and you look it in the eye, and you respond to people, and you don't take too much shit from people. I mean, you respond in a very precise manner, and you're tough, and I respect that. And thirdly, you're an intellectual. I mean, the study process that you've been going through. I don't know if you were born a bookworm, or you became one with circumstances. You can see the books in the background there. I mean, for people who are not following you yet, you should, because me as an Israeli who's educated on the subject, I've learned a few things from you through your reading. You have this book report that you do annually, and it's really fascinating watching you. So first of all, I want to thank you for that. I'd like to ask, if I may, you've talked about it in your posts, But I'm very interested in the first phase of you becoming a supporter of the Palestinian cause to begin with, with your background, being a Copt, being living in the States. Now I hear about your parents. Nevertheless, you were drawn into this kind of social environment. And I'm really interested about that because this is something we're seeing now on mass scale, both in Middle Easterns that live in the West and Westerners themselves that are kind of pulled into this fire. And I'd love for you if you could elaborate about how this happened to you. How do you see it in retrospective?
Yeah, so for
Thank
me,
you.
I was born in Massachusetts. And for up until, so I was born in 87, lived in Massachusetts up until 2004. By the time I moved, I think, to California, I think I was 16 or 17. And so growing up in Massachusetts, I lived about an hour and 15 minutes away from the nearest church. I don't know if it was the only church in the state, but that was actually the closest one to us. And so the problem with my upbringing was that I didn't have a strong Coptic identity because most of the people who went to that church, they grew up nearby the church. They grew up in that community. And so I was, quite detached from that. And so I always felt like black sheep in the Coptic Orthodox Church. Then I also always felt like I was too Egyptian for the Americans, too American for some of the Egyptians. And so it was an identity crisis. Up until 9/11, I thought I was white. I really thought I was white up until 9/11. And then 9/11 happened, and the whites let me know in no uncertain terms, oh, you're Arab. So that's actually where I heard it from the first time, that I'm Arab, was from Americans saying, oh no, you're Arab. You're not, you're not white. You're not this. You're not that. You are Arab. Because they obviously they didn't know about what Coptic was to that. And my parents do speak Arabic, so it wasn't hard for me to create that linkage. And then, but I never knew anybody in Massachusetts I didn't have any close Arab and Muslim friends in Massachusetts. All my friends were American. That changed once I came to California and I was finishing up high school and entering college. That's when I started to meet Palestinians, Syrians, Lebanese. My parents had Arab friends in Massachusetts, but they were their friends. Like I could have cared less. But that's where I started making those connections here. And so, I've taken into consideration that now it's been a few years that I've been called Arab and I've been thrown into, this Middle East conflict. But I felt like I was alone. I felt just really isolated in my life. And so then when I met these people and they speak Arabic like me, it might be a different dialect of Arabic, but they speak Arabic. And I'm actually learning more Arabic from them because my Arabic wasn't great when I met them. But because I came to know them, like my Arabic improved drastically. And you also look at similar things like, oh, their parents were immigrants. My parents were immigrants from the same region. They grew up with the same music that I listened to. They grew up with the same movies that my parents watched. So it was really easy for me to transition into that because in a lot of ways it already felt like home. It felt like, oh, I've been searching for this. Like I never had this before. So I've been searching for this. But shortly after, you were conditioned to extremism. Shortly after, and I tell people, I've mentioned this story quite a few times. Naive me, I was outside of a hookah bar, and I was talking to this older Palestinian gentleman. Maybe he was in his early 30s, and I am asking him questions. I am trying to get a moderate answer out of this guy because I am naive. I am under the impression that everybody wants two states and that they just got to work out the details, it's just little details that need to be worked out. And so I'm bouncing questions off this guy. And so my first question was, so we want a two-state solution, right? Palestinian state and Israeli state. And he's very direct. He is not pulling any punches. So his first answer was absolutely not. One Palestinian state from the river to the sea. No such thing as Israel. It's our land, not theirs. I was like, okay, but that's not the first time I've heard that, right? So then my next question is, okay, but we're against harming Israeli civilians, right? And he looked at me and he said, there's no such thing as an Israeli civilian. They are all settlers, what they call in Arabic, mustawtinin. every Israeli is required to serve in the military, so they are either gonna be soldiers, they either are soldiers, or they used to be soldiers. And then, and this is where I'm getting desperate, because I am like dying to hear a moderate response to my questions. And so I think I went with something that I thought would guarantee a moderate response. And I asked him, okay, but suicide bombing is obviously wrong, right? And he looks at me dead in the face, doesn't skip a beat, and he says, Habibi, this is all we have. And that was, I could say that was the first moment where I chose to go against my better judgment. And I think what a lot of people do in the West, Americans, is that, you know, the pro-Palestinian crowd is not shy about extreme opinions. They say that openly, you know. But what happens is I think a lot of Westerners, when they're getting indoctrinated into this crap, they say to themselves the same thing that I said to myself. Oh, well, eventually they'll moderate. Eventually they will evolve on their positions, because you can't be that unpragmatic. You project your own idealism, your own naivety onto them, you know? And they are telling you quite directly what they want, what they're going to do to achieve what they want, and what their goals are. They're telling you to your face. But now you are doing something which, again, Dr. Annette Wilf coined this. It's West-splaining. You are projecting Western ideals onto a people that don't give a shit about that. So, yeah, that's how it goes, and that's how it went for me. Now, it might be different for, you know, people who don't have roots to the region, like I have roots to the region. In that case, it's almost like an even more bizarre leap, because I don't know how you can be gays for Gaza. We used to have, we had people that were actual sex workers and people in the sex industry that were supporting, you know, the Palestinians. I remember I would look at them and I'll be like, are you lost? Like, what are you doing here? Like, I don't have a problem with what you do. I'm a very live and let live person. But I'm like, you do know my friends despise what you do and despise everything you are. And, you know, one of them literally was arguing with me on whether Hamas is moral or immoral, whether Hezbollah is moral or immoral. These were the conversations I was having. I had already mentally checked out of being pro-Palestine, but I'd had these friends still. My social circle was still largely, you know, people who were either Arab, Muslim, or sympathetic towards those causes. So, yeah.
Amazing. So this actually calls for one of Gedalia's questions. I'll ask it, and then I'll invite Valeria to ask herself another question. So Gedalia asks, is Palestinianism, so-called, as you mentioned, do you see it as a specific movement for a specific people, or more of a banner to march under to undermine Western civilization?
I am going to, you're going to notice that I borrow heavily from Dr. Annette Wilf. I truly adore her. Palestinianism has brought the worst out of leftism, pan-Arabism, Islamism, and sort of Western racism all into one thing. And right now it is absolutely used as a vehicle to undermine Western civilization. And they will say it themselves. I mean, they're not shy about it. They say, yes, we want to dismantle not just Israel. They want to dismantle capitalism. They want to dismantle the USA, Canada, Australia, the UK. They think that Palestinianism is going to be this vehicle that simultaneously liberates every marginalized group in the world. But it's just so diametrically the opposite of that. It just, if you know the truth about this conflict, you cannot conceivably think this. You cannot conceivably think this to yourself. It is absolutely a vehicle to undermine Western civilization. And, you know, you don't want to take my word for it, fine. But then you have to explain to me, why is it that the Palestinians have associated themselves with literally every anti-democratic regime in history? They align themselves with the Nazis. They align themselves with Maoist China. They align themselves with Castro's Cuba, they aligned themselves with the Soviet Union. They aligned themselves with Saddam Hussein. They aligned themselves with the Ayatollah Khomeini. They literally every anti-democratic, every anti-human rights regime they have aligned themselves with. So at some point, you have to look at the facts, as hard as they are to look at. And you have to really start asking yourself questions. Does this ideology actually liberate me? Does this ideology actually serve the better interests of those marginalized groups, whether you're gay, whether you're, indigenous South American, any of these groups? Does it actually liberate them? It doesn't.
Yes. So Valeria, I would like to invite you to ask your question.
Yes, hi.
Hello.
Hi, Dalia.
How are you? My name is Valeria. I'm from Israel. Thank you. I wanted to ask, please, Michael, during your journey of, waking up from a long sleep, did you notice something interesting? There's a tendency amongst Muslim communities to display some kind of weird racism towards other people. Now, I know Islam is not racist because anybody can become Muslim, but an example would be the Bedouin tribes in Israel, in which skin colors matters a lot. They don't even marry darker people sometimes. Or in the UK, the rape gangs, they were obviously racist. They were calling those girls white slags, pigs, and so on. So is it something that you noticed maybe in Egypt, maybe even in the US? And maybe you even noticed that whilst they do that, they call everybody else racist, which is interesting.
Yes. So it's definitely not exclusive to Muslims. Unfortunately, Arabic-speaking Christians are susceptible to the same sort of colorism that you see from Muslims. I mean, unfortunately, I have personal experiences with this. Some of my own relatives have disapproved of women that I dated simply because they were very dark-skinned. And it is a very, very unfortunate side of the Middle East. I would say that by and large, Arab and Muslim countries are overtly racist. And it is hypocrisy because, they accuse everybody of racism. And it doesn't just stop at racism. I mean, they might look at you and say, oh, you're not really, Jewish, you're this European colonialist. You could be darker skinned than me, and they'll still tell you that. That's the crazy thing about it. But it's crazy because they say that you cannot possibly be the real Jews because Jews have to have a certain complexion. Okay? But then what you see at these these pro-Palestinian marches and demonstrations and whatnot, the Jews that do tend to support the Palestinians, they are literally the whitest Jews on earth. But somehow, those Jews are real Jews when they're supporting the Palestinians. But Jews that, are proud of their Zionism, proud of the state of Israel, and want to make sure that the state of Israel continues to exist, those people aren't the real Jews. So yeah, it's absolutely hypocrisy. And consider this. I'm Egyptian, 100% Egyptian. I did my DNA test, came back 100% Coptic. I was shocked. I thought I would come out at least a little bit Greek, but it came back 100% Coptic Egyptian. I know Jewish people who were in the diaspora in Eastern Europe who are darker skinned than me. Now, at the end of the day, that doesn't matter because skin color doesn't matter. But these are things that the people on the other side, they don't think about and they don't want to think about it. So, yeah.
Thank you. So a question from the chat on YouTube, actually an interesting one. Do Copts in Egypt are demanded or coerced in any way to pay jizya?
It's not the official policy of the country. So there's nothing in Egyptian law that requires Christians to pay jizya. What happens is in some of the more rural and remote areas of Egypt, you will have Muslim gangs that extort Coptic business people. So let's say there's maybe it's not even business people, maybe it could be more general from person to person, but I do know that Coptic businesses have been extorted by Muslim gangs to pay jizya. And when they don't, they will burn down either their home, their business, they will attack them in one way or another. Yeah, they absolutely do that. It's just not a policy of the government. There's nothing written within the Egyptian constitution or Egyptian legal framework that allows for that. But also, I want people to understand this, because a lot of Muslims and Arabs will say, oh, well, nobody pays jizya anymore. That means everything is equal. The only reason that we don't pay jizya anymore to them is because when the British took control over when the British and the French took control over much of the Middle East following the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire, they are the ones that ended that practice. It did not come from the Muslims themselves.
So another question from our viewers on YouTube regarding the status of the Copts, and the basically, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the complete ignorance of the West from the basically the anti-Christian policy that is being deployed on the ground, whether it's from the government level or from the people level. Christians are being haunted, and the West seems to be very silent about it, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's not.
So there is a segment of the American population that does know about us and supports us. I hear from American conservatives quite often. They know about us. They know what we're going through. But then there is the left side of American politics. And the left side is explicitly anti-Christian. They're anti-religion. It seems like they're anti every religion except Islam, but they are quite hateful of Christianity. And so what they do is what they tend to do with Israel is, in the case of Israel, where they sort of project their own country's history of racism onto Israelis, and they call them a white settler colonial state. What they do is they project, some of the bloodiest moments in Christian history, whether you want to go through the Inquisition and the Crusades. I know there's more historical context to that, but I'm just using those as examples. They will take things like that, or maybe the Christian involvement in Jim Crow and slavery in the United States, and they will project that onto Arab Christians. And they will make us just as guilty for that as they make American Christians guilty for what they did in the past. So a lot of it is just this hatred of Christianity. And I'm not somebody, I'm not Christian. I'm agnostic. I don't believe in any religion. But if I bring up what Coptic people go through in Egypt, the first response that I get from these Western liberals, these Western leftists, is, well, what about the Crusades? First off, the Coptic people didn't even do the Crusades. I don't know why you bring that into the conversation. But it's this reluctance to approach things as they are. It's this reluctance to directly tackle an issue. And so, because one of the things that we do here is that, and this goes back to the bigotry of low expectations, the idea that Arabs and Muslims simply have no agency. They are like animals who are just responding off pure instinct. They're not rationalizing anything. Because so what they say is like, well, what are the Palestinians supposed to do other than kill, rape, and suicide bomb? Now, I'm not saying that's the only thing Palestinians are good for. I don't want, I have to add that disclaimer. But these are their notorious methods of war, and you can't tell me otherwise. There is no non-violent movement within the Palestinians. So what they do is they use that, whether it's what they call the occupation, the presence of Israeli Jews in Judea and Samaria, they will use all these issues to then justify Arab and Muslim terrorism. But when I bring up Coptic suffering, or if I bring up Druze suffering, or I bring up, any other marginalized group in the world, Kurds, Tibetans, and I ask, well, these people are also suffering. They are also suffering, but you don't see us engage in the same actions that they do. And that is when I will typically get either you are a racist, you're an Islamophobe, or well, what about the Crusades? It's just so stupid.
That's really amazing one. So I think that it's safe to say that the events of the last few days in Syria took us to a crossroad in the Middle East, And I would like to ask you, what do you think, what kind of Middle East we will have in the next few years or so? I think that we can point the finger at three basic scenarios. The first one says that what we have now is what we will continue to have, more or less. Wars and instability in the same patterns. The second one says that we will see basically the Abraham Accords. We will see them expanding in a few possible ways, which will increase stability probably. And the third one saying that we will see the new phenomena of Israel supporting minorities expanding to more and more minorities in the Middle East, maybe gaining their independence or their autonomy in one way or another with a linkage to Israel or alliance to Israel. Which one of those scenarios do you think is more probable, or maybe you have a fourth scenario?
You know, I actually thought about this question yesterday, something similar to it. And I was wondering, if you asked me this question, how am I going to respond? And I genuinely don't know. Truly don't know. I have to sort of give a word of caution to Israelis. I'm somebody who voted for Trump. I voted for him for national security reasons. That was the most important issue to me. And I know a lot of Israelis were excited about Trump, but I think Israelis are starting to come to the realization that Trump is a very transactional person. You're not going to get anything without giving something back to him. And so America has signaled in pretty unsubtle terms that they are seeking to leave the Middle East. They want to focus on the China threat. At least Trump does anyway. They are looking for somewhat of an exit from the Middle East. And that will mean that the Israeli-Palestinian issue will not be so important in the coming years. Maybe 10, 15 years, we can be looking at a very different political landscape in the United States. So I don't know what's going to happen, but, you know, peace with Saudi Arabia sounds amazing. It does. And I want to see it. I want to see peace between Israel and all her neighbors. But at what cost? I don't think it's worth just any cost. I think Israel's security and safety is paramount to anything. And so my biggest fear is that Israel gets strong-armed politically into accepting a bad deal in order to secure relations with Saudi Arabia. And so I think it's extremely important for Israel to, I'm not saying Israel should abandon the United States, and I'm not saying the United States should abandon Israel, but I do think that it is worth Israel's efforts to build a really nice alliance with Israel. I can't tell you what's going to happen in the next 10, 15 years. Within the next 10, 15 years, we're no longer looking at a Trump administration. We might be looking at a liberal left administration that is sort of seeking to get political vengeance. And Israel might be one of the casualties of that. Israel might even be a casualty of the Trump administration. I can't say for sure that it's not going to be, because I said Trump is a very transactional person. And so I don't know what the solution is. I really don't. Sometimes I believe in, not a one-state solution in the terms that the Palestinians describe it. I mean a one Jewish state solution in which Israel has sovereignty over the entirety of the land, and some sort of residency citizenship framework would be worked out for the Israelis versus the Palestinians. But I'm not even completely sure about that, because when I hear Dr. Annette Wilf talk about it, she will make good points to show why that is not as feasible of an option as I would like it to be. But the most important thing right now is that Israel wins this war and eradicates Hamas. Until we do that, really everything else that we talk about in the future is sort of immaterial.
So actually, in the last few days, what we're seeing, at least from our perspective, is a very vocal and alarming wave of anti-Israeli sentiment in the world that is being faded from the very hard views and videos that are coming from Gaza. So I would like to ask you an unfair question. If you were the Prime Minister of Israel now, how would you deal with the Gaza situation specifically and in general with the entire Middle East situation?
Whew. Wow. That was a question I didn't anticipate.
Sorry.
No. Great question. I'm glad you asked. How would I handle Gaza? This is gonna make me sound pretty cruel, but the Arabs need to understand that they have lost the war. The Palestinians need to be made to feel exactly how the Germans and Japanese felt post-World War II. See, what the international community has done is, since the beginning of this conflict, it has prevented Israel from all-out victory and prevented the Arabs from suffering an all-out defeat. You could say there was one time where the Arabs really understood that they lost, which was 1967. And I think this is what pushed Egypt to become more pragmatic with Anwar Sadat. And they realized that this is a fruitless endeavor. We have to focus on ourselves before we focus on the Palestinians. So whatever it takes to have that message sink into the psyche of the Arab and Muslim world is wars have a short menu. You either win or you lose. And the Arab and Muslim world has gone all in, like somebody with a gambling addiction, and they keep losing. And a gambling addiction is easy. You go to therapy, you see a counselor, you get that worked out. But these people, they're addicted to the annihilation of the Jewish state. And so they need to be made to feel that this gamble is no longer worth it. And so what I would do is I would annex half of Gaza, at least the northern half. Annex the northern half, create it as a buffer zone, create that much needed separation between the Israeli communities along the Gaza envelope. And then, that does leave the question of, okay, what happens to the West Bank? I'm not exactly sure. That's the thing. I think that if we keep going along this path, that Israel will have to at least annex the communities that are in the West Bank. And I think that will be the most likely path, because I don't think that I think it would be political suicide for any Israeli leader right now to talk about evacuating how many hundreds of thousands of Israelis who live in Judea and Samaria right now. It was just, we tried it with Gaza. It didn't work. It was a horrible idea. And we're not going to do it again with Judea and Samaria, which would be 10 times worse than what Gaza turned out to be. Hamas is more popular in Judea and Samaria amongst the Arab than it is in Gaza right now. But yeah, that's what I would say, is that they need to feel that they are the losers, which they have not been felt. They have not felt that. That has not sunk into them. And it hasn't sunk into them because we have organizations like UNRWA who have perpetuated the conflict for so long. UNRWA perpetuates this fantasy amongst the Palestinians that Israel is just an aberration. Eventually they won't be there. Eventually you will be able to return. So, it's a matter of Israel being strong to do what it needs to do to secure its existence. And then it's also a matter of, dismantling groups like UNRWA, who have done unspeakable horrors for the Palestinians, just in terms of the development of their ideology, the development of their goals. That would be my answer.
Okay, so I'm going to read another question from Valeria, and I have another question, and I urge everyone who is with us, if you want to ask something, that's the time to raise your hand or to write it on the chat, because we're about to end in a few minutes. So the question from Valeria: Israel has almost zero PR public relations. Flyers over Gaza is not cyber. This is
Did the screen freeze?
Yeah, it looks like Tom disappeared for a moment.
Oh. It's all right. I got nothing but time.
I'm going to text him personally.
Simba.
Okay, recording stop. Mike, why don't I keep on with a question by Valerie?
Yeah, of course.
So Israel has almost zero PR. Flyers over Gaza is not psy-war. This is a real problem. Michael, what would you suggest on this front? In other words, what we conceive in Israel as a failing PR struggle.
I wouldn't say that you have failing PR. I would just say that you are up against a machine of lies. It's an industry of lies. So one of the unfortunate things about war is that information during the fog of war is unreliable. It's very much hit or miss. We're not really going to know the details of this war until the war has been concluded and the proper research has been done by people who are impartial and they're not, they don't have an agenda to just delegitimize Israel. So what I would say is a lie makes its way halfway around.
Sorry, I think you get disconnected.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yes, you're back with us, Tom. We continued with the answer.
Oh, great.
Michael was just saying that he doesn't see us as having a failed PR campaign, but we're facing a machine of lies. So take it from there, Mike.
Thank you.
So it is an industry of lies, which is quite literally the title of one of my favorite books, Industry of Lies by Ben-Dror Yemeni. Amazing book, one of my top. But let's take an example with the genocide claim. This isn't a new claim. They've been saying this ever since the conflict started. They say that it's been a genocide since the 40s or the 50s or whatever. Now, I will bring up facts that you cannot dispute, okay? And they will still believe in the genocide claim. I will bring up the fact that, when Israel took control of Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem in 1948, the life expectancy, the average life expectancy was 48 years old. Today, their life expectancy is around 75 years old. Okay, and I know that Israel has not, occupied or has not maintained a presence in Gaza since 2007, but that doesn't do anything to diminish the reality, was that because of the Israeli presence, their life expectancy grew. So they're living longer. And then their infant mortality rates went down. They used to suffer 162 per 1,000 births. So out of 1,000 births, 162 didn't make it. That was in 1948. Today, it's, notwithstanding the war, prior to the war, it was below 20 per 1,000 births. This is not a genocide, but the problem is that these facts don't matter. So it's not a PR problem. It's a truth problem. You have one side that is breastfed lies and anti-Semitism from infancy, and you have the other side that wants to give you the truth. And maybe they get some things wrong. Maybe they get a detail here and there wrong. Maybe they're not as well read on the history. But the other side, the Palestinianism side, is going to resist to the last every ounce of truth that we can give them. So it is not a PR war. It is a war between lies and truth.
My last question I would like to ask you, and about the relationship between Israel and Egypt. I know that you weren't born in Egypt and you don't live the Egyptian politics, but our countries have had peace agreement for decades now. but it seems that it didn't develop any peace between the people themselves. On the contrary, it seems that anti-Semitism in Egypt is on the rise. That the two countries are even
I think we have a connectivity issue.
Yeah, looks like it.
Was that a question that was sent in, or was that a question from him?
I think that's a question from Tom. I'm going to speculate what he's about to say.
Right.
Because we have had what we call a cold peace, right? I mean, when Anwar Sadat came to Israel, I was 3 years old, and I went on my dad's shoulders, and we greeted him with Egyptian flags, and the atmosphere was in Israel. The atmosphere was the Messiah is coming. I mean, you know, it's the first. Finally, we have major peace agreement with Egypt. But the reality is, of course, we have what we call cold peace. It's a peace of interest between the regimes, with a slight abruption of the so-called Arab Spring there. But we have the sense that Egyptians are actually educated to hate us, again, from the bottom up. And I think with Tom, knowing the way he thinks, he's interested in how do you see it all going? Do you see, considering, supposing the regime stays stable over there, do you think Egypt will be on the Abraham Accord side, or would it perhaps turn to the Turkish Qatari axis? How do you see it play out?
I don't think that it would turn to the Qatari Turkish axis, because Egypt cares first and foremost about its sovereignty, and it understands that Turkey and Qatar, they are part of a greater Islamist agenda that doesn't respect sovereignty, that doesn't respect the unique history of Egypt. So I don't see that happening, but I also don't see it getting better between Egypt and Israel, unfortunately. I think first and foremost, Egypt is literally the most anti-Semitic Arab country. It's the fact. It reports the highest rates of anti-Semitism. And to bring it to a religious level, I think it's very hard to gain that warm peace when Egypt has an extremism problem. I mean, there is an authentic hadith that states that the hour will not come until the Muslims slaughter the Jews. So it's hard to shake that off. Also, Egypt has paid one of the greatest costs for the Palestinian cause. We've lost over 30,000 soldiers fighting Israel. So that doesn't go away quietly either. There's always going to be the resentment from that fact. You know, UAE has not had the relationship with Israel that Egypt had, or Syria had, or Lebanon. They're going to hate you for the foreseeable future, unfortunately. I really wish it was different, but I can't sit here and BS you. Egyptians are very hateful, you know, and it's even if they love everybody else, the one people I know they hate are Israelis and Jewish people. Yes. It's just sad. I think maybe had Anwar Sadat not been assassinated, maybe that could have changed, because I think Anwar Sadat was quite optimistic and quite happy to have relations with Israel rather than relations with Syria or the Soviet Union. I think Anwar Sadat was a pragmatist, and for all of, you know, there's a few things that I could criticize Anwar Sadat about, but for that thing, I am eternally grateful to Anwar Sadat.
Definitely. So before we conclude, is there anything else that you want to say directly to the people of Israel?
Defend the Druze, bring them back home, and Am Yisrael Chai.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Inspiring. It was fascinating. We learned so much from you, and I hope to see you again shortly. I think that we haven't concluded all the possible discussions that we could have about the future of this area. And good night, meanwhile. Thanks a lot.
Laila Tov, it will be my
Thank you very much. And for all the viewers, please tap into Coptic Kaparah. It's good for the soul. It'll make you happy.
We will put a link to your webpage in the description of the YouTube video. Thank you.